We are good to go.
All right. Well, thank you for coming to talk to me today. My name is Bill Tibbetts, and I'm with Crossroads Urban Center, and we have sent every candidate for elected office in Salt Lake City 5 questions about housing and homelessness, and so I'm really grateful that you have come today to talk about, answer our 5 questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Bill. Thanks for inviting me out. Great to be here.
Thanks. Your name is Michael Valentine?
Yeah. I can do you want me to do like a quick intro?
Sure.
So, I'm Michael Valentine. I'm a candidate for mayor of Salt Lake City. I'm the only candidate that hasn't been the mayor before or isn't currently the mayor, so the underdog for sure. People might know me as Mr. Pantages, they call me, or the theater guy. I've been trying to save the theater for a few years, and people actually asked me to run for office because of that, director of nonprofits and stuff. And then I believe I'm the only candidate in the mayor or city council race that has personally been homeless, so it's an issue that's very important to me. I actually believe it's the most important issue in Utah politics aside from saving the Great Salt Lake. So it's something I'm very passionate about and super excited to answer all the questions.
All right. So first question we sent all the candidates is about housing for people with disabling conditions who have an extensive history of homelessness. And so it is, do you support the production of sufficient permanent supportive housing to meet the needs of people with physical and mental disabilities in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually running on a platform of curing homelessness, and it's a word choice I use very specifically. As a former unsheltered person myself, I really believe there's a huge disconnect on this issue, and unsheltered people aren't being listened to. And I think there's a system right now that's kind of perpetuating homelessness. I'm not a huge fan of the shelter model. I want to put people directly into housing. I think housing is the cure to homelessness because people really need that housing for stability to get help with their treatment, especially mental health and disabilities. A lot of people that are disabled aren't going to be working. Some people will be, they're on federal disability stipend. So the people just saying, hey, go get a job, pull yourself up from your bootstraps isn't a likely scenario. These people deserve housing even though they're disabled, even though they have mental health challenges, and they need to be put directly into housing. So I absolutely support this. I actually have a more ambitious goal of housing everybody within the first year of my administration. Pretty lofty goal. But again, from looking at this from an unsheltered standpoint of listening to unsheltered people, knowing what they actually need, looking and listening to these lived experiences unsheltered people have and the actual root causes of homelessness is a very different scenario that's kind of going on right now that I think. So I absolutely support this. Very adamant about housing everybody in Utah. I think on a national level, we could actually lead the country and be one of the first cities, major cities in America to end homelessness, to eradicate homelessness so it just doesn't exist here anymore, so everyone has housing. And that's actually, we'll get kind of into it with some of these other questions, but it's a two-pronged approach of putting everyone that's currently unsheltered into housing and then stopping evictions, stopping people from entering homelessness again. So.
Okay. So you sort of answered our second question, but I'll ask it anyway because we sent everybody the same 5 questions.
Yeah.
And this is about housing for families with kids that have an extensive history of homelessness and disabling conditions. So would you actively support efforts to build 200 units of child-centered supportive housing in Salt Lake County during the next 5 years to meet the current needs?
Yeah, absolutely. This is such an important issue. This question is really great because 200 units is nothing, right? Like a lot of these apartment complexes going around, they're 250 units. That's one apartment building, So can we build one apartment building for unsheltered children and families? I think absolutely. So I also should mention I am a licensed real estate investor or agent. So I have an active license with the state. I'm a business owner. I have a small cider shop down at the Gateway on Rio Grande. I have a lot of unsheltered folks come in there and talk to me there. So I have a lot of experience kind of like on both sides of this equation of being unsheltered, but also having experience in business and real estate and learning like how we can have win-win solutions and combine the two. But yeah, I absolutely support this. It's really crazy to me that we live in a country where children are on the streets and unsheltered and going hungry, and families are struggling. I think that's really upsetting to me, and it's actually something I'm committed to. And as I mentioned in the first question, I would take that even farther, and it's my goal to house everybody that's unsheltered in Salt Lake City within the first year of my administration. And then I forgot to mention too in the first question about mental health and physical disabilities. I think it's really important to talk about unsheltered folks and the homeless community, and understand that people suffer from, they're disproportionate to different folks. A lot of people think that like drug use or mental health makes people homeless, but we actually they see the opposite sometimes, where people end up doing more drugs because they're homeless to cope with that situation. So I think it's very important we look at homelessness and understand that people of color, different queer and trans folks are disproportionately homeless, and same with folks that suffer from mental health, physical disabilities, veterans are disproportionately homeless. So it's really important to look at these specific groups and understand what's going on there. So, but yeah, just for the second question, I absolutely support that. So.
Okay. Our next three questions are all recommendations that sort of relate to recommendations that came out of the city's new study of gentrification and displacement.
Yeah.
And so the first one is, do you support the creation of a tenant relocation assistance program in Salt Lake City?
I do, but I think the better question is instead of being like retroactive of what's going on, I'd like to be more proactive. I think that's a great step, but the real question is, why are these tenants getting evicted? And I think we need stronger tenant laws. I was actually illegally evicted in October of last year, 2021, from the apartments I was living in. And I struggled to find attorneys in Utah that even represented tenants. Most of the attorneys are landlords. So the tenant laws are really atrocious, and it kind of goes into some of the public corruption going on, where people are being funded by developers, working for developers, taking all this money from these corporate interests. Senators up on the Hill that are responsible for about 40 or 50% of all evictions that are passing housing laws. I think it's really egregious. Yeah, I think we need stronger laws to begin with, so people aren't being evicted. They have a right to housing. Housing is a human right, as the saying goes these days. And I really believe that, because people shouldn't be getting evicted over, paying their bills for landlords just trying to, make investments. That just seems crazy to, as I mentioned earlier, like curing homelessness is really a two-pronged approach. We have to house everybody that's currently homeless, and we have to stop people from entering homelessness as well. And that kind of goes there. And yeah, I would love to see stronger tenant laws so people don't get evicted, and that can be through the city paying rental assistance, as we saw during COVID with federal COVID money, and also even going even further, putting people into housing ownership, so they're not just perpetually renting, and that could be through programs with the city for like mortgage assistance or first-time home buyers, and helping people get directly into housing. Whether that's a house or a condo or tiny homes, just something they can possibly own. Because a lot of the rent prices, we don't really talk about this, are insane, and sometimes they're higher than mortgages are. So I would love to see a lot of these things put in place, and just see people not being evicted to begin with.
Okay. So under current law, developers can destroy affordable units when they're developing new projects without any consequences. Do you support the creation of a community benefit policy to prevent the loss of existing affordable units in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of follows the same approach of being more proactive than retroactive. Again, why is it the current law for developers to destroy affordable housing? Just because developers are writing the laws in the city and the state right now. So I would absolutely love to just kind of flip that on its head and just push against developers from even destroying affordable housing to begin with, not necessarily to create a program where they're replacing affordable housing they're destroying, but to not let them destroy affordable housing to begin with. And again, this kind of goes to the theater and historic properties as well. We're seeing a lot of historic buildings torn down. The theater was illegally destroyed for luxury housing, and it should have never happened. We need to enforce these laws. We need to create more laws so affordable housing can't even be destroyed, and really have a city that works for the community and the public, not necessarily the real estate developers and corporations. I brought this picture for you too, Bill. It's a picture of the theater. I'll just show that up to the folks. This was a plan we designed. We're restoring the theater, but a lot of folks don't realize we actually had plans to build affordable housing above the theater. And we were looking at a lot of different options. We were working with a national group called the League of Historic American Theaters. They actually did a study and a report on our theater on the Pantages Theater in 2015. And their study actually showed, plans for how housing could be in there, how a hotel could be in there, how a condo could be in there, like a built above the theater, how additional housing could be there. So there's really win-win situations here where we can protect historic buildings, invest in arts and culture and all these things, but also influence housing as well, because who wouldn't want to live in affordable housing above a cool theater downtown? But it's really important to find these win-win solutions and figure out how we can kind of have our cake and eat it too, and invest in the community across the board through with arts and culture and housing. So anyway.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, real quick too. I would like to say as well that I'm a huge fan of anti-discrimination, or not discrimination, but that too. But anti-displacement laws, gentrification laws. It's important to not have people be forced out of communities. Looking at history, we see a lot of that in downtown Salt Lake. We see these, different areas that used to be Japantown, Chinatown, Jewish communities, Greek communities that are no longer there. They were all displaced. And we need to stop that from happening, especially on the west side. I'd like to shout out a community group, the Rose Park Brown Berets. They're very adamant and very protective of the community there, and the Hispanic culture, the Latino culture over there, as well as Pacific Islanders and these different historic cultural areas. And I think a great solution to that is actually making these areas historic districts. So a lot of folks kind of don't understand this, but the historic laws aren't necessarily just about one building being historic, but neighborhoods as well. So we could very easily make areas of the West Side cultural historic areas for these for historical cultural groups with Pacific Islanders, Hispanic cultures and different stuff. So those can be protected from gentrification, so people aren't being displaced to begin with, and really being pushed out of their communities. I think that's very important.
Okay. So our last question we sent all the candidates is, do you support efforts to increase funding to address homelessness and housing instability in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is kind of the most vital question, because funding is the we need that to, otherwise we're just talking about solutions with not any real oomph to it. So having these plans put in place and then figuring out how we fund these and how they're invested in is so important. And again, we mentioned that apartment building for 200 units. That's one apartment building. These are very doable solutions. We invested $60 million in 3 shelters in the last few years, and I think the better solution is to not look at this continued model of housing or homelessness as a revolving door where people go to a shelter at night and get kicked out in the morning, but actually put them directly into housing. And there's a lot of studies that have been done nationally that show that it's cheaper to just put people directly into housing. And as a formerly unsheltered person myself, it's so important that people have stability. I remember when I was homeless, it was a kind of a 24-hour cycle. You'd only really think about where am I going to sleep that day, where I'm going to eat, where I'm going to shower. So it's almost impossible in that mentality of survival to then be oh, how am I going to get a job? How am I going to think about these other normal things that other people think about when you're just trying to live, hour by hour. So it's so important we invest in this. Again, I think this is the most important issue in Utah, especially in Salt Lake. It's an issue that's very important to me, and it's something that needs to be solved. I think we could really lead the country on this, and again, investing in this and properly funding it is how we do that. So it has to be backed by real action. So.
Okay. So how do people who like what they've heard and want to
Sure.
learn more about your campaign, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I'm building a website right now. It's going to be mayorvalentine.com. I'm hoping to launch that in a few weeks before the barbecue on July 12th that you guys are doing. We're live streaming on Instagram right now. So it's Mayor Valentine, SLC. I'm also on Twitter, on Facebook. People can email me directly until the website launches, just michael@mayorvalentine.com. And yeah, they can also come down to my store at the Gateway, Six Sailor Cider. I have a small cider shop. Feel free to come in. I'm going to be doing like office hours there, open office hours. People can just come hang out and talk to me about anything they like. And yeah, I'm excited to finish the website and launch that. And we're going to be ramping up a lot of stuff later this summer, having events and movies and different Q&As and a bunch of fun things going on. So.
Great. So you'll be there at our barbecue on July 12th?
Yeah, absolutely. I love a good barbecue, and again, I appreciate you guys inviting me. For those that don't know, Crossroads Urban Center has been around for about 50 years. Is that right?
Since 1966.
Yep. Very focused on homelessness and helping our community. I'm really grateful for all the work you guys do. I didn't even know you guys existed when I was homeless. I probably would have come in here, but. Yeah, I'll definitely be at the barbecue. Thanks so much for having us, Bill, and really look forward to the future events with you guys.
Okay, thank you so much for taking your time.
Absolutely.